All right, welcome to Before the Day Ends. We're glad you're here today. We are now on YouTube. I think some folks have found it easier to view us on YouTube. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and get updates. Also, we're still on Rumble. So there are two locations you can get us there, on YouTube and on Rumble. All right, now we are looking at what's traditionally called the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 through 7. The part of Matthew's first book where Jesus is talking to us and giving us his renewed covenant. But that's what it is. It's not a sermon, it's a covenant. And as part of a covenant, what we have here is a definition of how God sees our relationship, what God expects from us as his followers. And as a covenant, it has the parts of a covenant. And again, you can review this as we talked about last time. So for example, we have who is named, us and God. What are the stipulations of the covenant? How is the covenant protected? So today we're going to talk about the first section, again, traditionally called the Beatitudes, and it really defines who God is by defining what God sees as blessed. So we see who God is by looking at how God sees the world and how God sees us. Let's take a look at it right now. Matthew 5, and we'll begin in verse 3. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. And by the way, there's a whole chapter on this in my book. In the chapter called Who Wins in the End, we'll talk about what this word meek really means. And finally, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. So we have in these an internalization of the commandments. It's about our attitude. Christian morality begins with being righteous more than being right. It's our attitude, what drives our actions, our motivations. In fact, later in Matthew, Jesus is talking to the Pharisees, and he says this in Matthew 23:15. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you cross sea and land to make a single convert, and you make the new convert twice as much a child of hell as yourselves. What he's saying here is that you do the right thing, you go to make a convert, you're working toward this person, but your motivations, the reason you're doing it, is making it worse than if you didn't do it at all. So in a sense, what we're saying here is the right action conducted with the wrong motivation is twice as bad as not doing it at all. So God is going to deal with our internal qualities. That's how he sees us as blessed. Notice that God deals with us, not with rules. When we talk about this covenant, it's about God dealing with us and not just a bunch of rules. And by the way, typically in this first list, these first four, these are things that are often seen as negatives. Poor in spirit, those who mourn. But again, God is dealing with us. So he takes our situation and shows us how to overcome in the midst of it by being faithful to him. He takes our external situation and drives it to our internal attitudes. In fact, the hope here is that our external situations don't determine our spiritual destiny. It doesn't have to shape our outlook on the world. We can change our internal attitudes. Now the second set, we have these first four, the second set we're going to see goes from the inward to the outward, because God does care about our outward actions. So in Matthew 5, beginning in verse 7, blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. So you see here, it moves from the internal to the outward, how we show mercy. We don't focus on, does this person get their comeuppance? We are going to focus on mercy. Again, this is nothing new. Proverbs 14:21 says this, those who despise their neighbors are sinners, but happy are those who are kind to the poor. So again, we see that we are to be merciful, how we take our actions and attitudes to the world around us. Matthew 5, 7 through 10. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Our attitudes in our heart drive us to a relationship with God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Again, notice it as peacemakers, not just sitting back and doing nothing. That is not peace. Sitting back and sitting in your hands and not getting involved, that's armistice. That's you go to your corner, and don't talk, don't interact. That's not peace. The word peace, shalom in Hebrew, means to be whole, to be complete. We work at completeness. We work at trying to restore relationships. Now, is that always possible? No. But Paul says, as far as it depends upon you and me, we do all that we can to bring peace. Now, sometimes that just doesn't happen. The other person may not be willing to engage. But as far as we are able, we are to bring peace. And then finally, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And we have an inclusio here. The first group hungered for righteousness. This last group, it says, are persecuted because of it. The internal attitude, you hunger for it. The external, you may be persecuted for it. And so we see this kind of inclusio, this beginning and ending, these bookends to these first few verses in Matthew 5. The lesson, we are in a covenant with a God that cares about the internal as well as the external. What we do, why we do it. Being righteous, not just being right. And we begin this covenant with God as not a bunch of rules. This is personal and it's practical. It applies to our lives each and every day. How we see ourselves, how we see God, and then how we in turn see others. And this will continue then throughout the rest of Jesus' covenant he gives to us in the rest of Matthew 5 through 7. Now next time we're going to pick up with who we are. So we'll begin in verse 13 of Matthew 5 and the sections about salt and light and this definition of how God is going to see us in the second part of this, the two parties in the covenant that we have with God. Thank you for joining us. We're glad that you were here today and hope you have a great day before the day ends.